Welcome back to 40 Crumbs Edition. We're now just 5 levels away from beating Adventure Mode, and it is here that we are finally introduced to the infamous Sunflower Zombies. Brace yourselves, because is about to hit the fan. Our first problem is that the new plant we just unlocked, the Punish Room, is practically useless. This thing somehow costs us 50 sun while doing even less damage than a long puff shroom, and its only ability is that it gains a quarter of a level of experience whenever a mushroom is destroyed next to it. Which, if you go through with the effort to destroy 4 mushroom plants next to it, all you get is the Punish Room firing 1 extra spore per attack. Yeah, half a pea shooter's worth of extra damage for sacrificing 4 mushrooms. Like, the damage output is so bad, this is basically the worst plant in the entire mod, considering just lone donuts are enough to overwhelm them. And believe you me, we're gonna need something better against Sunflower Zombies. Now, speaking of Sunflower Zombies, they actually can't spawn before the first flag, meaning we have plenty of time to just set up our cop cannons in peace. But just because we can max stall the early game using tall nuts and stock up on cop shots doesn't make this level easy in the slightest. Because in 40 Crumbs Edition, Sunflower Zombies deal massive damage to plants with solar beams with a range of half the board, move very fast, and have as much health as Gargantuars do, meaning to survive an instant kill, so not even cop cannons can do much to counter them. Oh, and to top it off, stalling them out using tall nuts isn't even an option either, since they also steal 50 sun directly from the bank every 8 seconds they're left alive. And in case you were wondering how you can counter the zombie, the answer is you don't. Like, this zombie is genuinely so ludicrous, I'm not even joking. The only way to actually win is to just pray to RNGs that they don't spawn, which obviously I wasn't skillful enough to pull off that strategy in my first run. And I know some of you are already thinking Spikeweed doesn't get hit by coned lasers, so maybe they can work against Sunflower Zombies by dodging their solar beams, right? But because Sunflower Zombies can also spawn in the water lane, even if Spikeweed were good, it wouldn't solve all our issues. And even then, Spikeweed doesn't do anything to protect our backlands from being vaporized, which we'll have to do without Tall Nut because even they can't survive for more than a few seconds. Like, these solar beams do so much damage, Walnut doesn't even have a chance to heal the plants around them before they die. Yeah, this level sure is gonna be a fun one indeed. Now, you can try and beat this level using just Doomshroom spam with Doomshroom Gods, but it's pretty much all luck dependent because Doomshroom just insta-dies to Sunflower Zombies' solar beams, and Bungies can just target our Doomshroom Gods at any time. Which, let's just keep it a buck and say the chances of that not happening are practically 0. So yeah, this strat is pretty terrible for this level if we want to beat it without restarting like 20 times for favorable Bungie Zombie RNG. And if you're ambitious like me and try using Pumpkin Protected Gloomshroom here, I can assure you that there's no chance they'll ever survive long enough to stall out the Sunflower Zombies, because just 2 solar beam attacks are already almost enough to kill the entire pumpkin, and obviously they don't protect any plants behind our Gloomshroom anyway, so this strategy is also a complete bust. So even though cop cannons aren't a great counter, it's kind of the best answer we have against Sunflower Zombies when everything else flat out sucks. And with cop cannon, it just comes down to praying for favorable spawns, which, you know, it'll work out eventually if you got patience like I do to just do runs over and over in search of that one attempt where RNGs favors us enough. And in my case, it took playing for almost 2 hours to finally get this run, where there were only 4 Sunflower Zombies between the first flag and the final wave. You can say I was able to get the win because I had determination, or that I had RNGs bail me out, but the truth is, there's really no other way to beat this level because of how stupid the Sunflower Zombies are in this mod, but if you thought this was dumb enough, it gets quite literally 10 times worse in the next level. Which, unfortunately, is level 6-7. This is by far the hardest level in the entire mod, with me having spent over 28 hours across 11 live streams playing just this one level. As you can imagine, editing this took even longer, so please do consider subscribing to the channel to support me, since making these videos takes such an insane amount of time. So, why is this level difficult? Well, spoilers, it's definitely not because of the new plant we unlock here, the Cold Garlic, which, for just 125 sun, slows down every zombie on the screen every 5 seconds, which is like crazy considering the Winter Melon upgrade on its own costs 200 sun. But we're only getting something as overpowered as that because surviving 3 whole flags of Sunflower Zombie spam would otherwise be impossible. Aside from that, the inclusion of both Bucketheads and Footballs makes the early game pretty rough, since Bucketheads absorb half the damage we do to other zombies, and that basically lets Footballs survive explosives like Doomshrooms, which means any strategies that rely on instant kill spam are just not gonna work when we'll just get overrun before we can set up our full defense. And the biggest problem is that we can't actually use Tall Nuts to stall here, since it might as well be impossible to replenish Tall Nuts fast enough to keep up with both Sunflower and Football zombies for 3 flags straight. So any strategies we've used in the past World 6 levels will basically not work here. So I had to think outside the box, and I theorized that we could actually stall by comboing Chompers and Pumpkins together, which, sure, won't do nearly as much damage as Cops or Doomshrooms, but stunlocking high damage zombies basically answers them because it negates all the damage they can potentially do. But obviously, Chomper's downside is that zombies need to be in close range for us to stunlock them. And against Sunflower zombies, that's not exactly guaranteed, because Pumpkins don't even have much health to begin with. They pretty much die if just 2 Sunflower zombies spawn in the same lane on the same wave, so we need to somehow mitigate this weakness. And of course, we can just use Doomshroom Gods, not as our main DPS, but as a way to stockpile up Doomshrooms in our back pocket when we got reliable early game defense from Chompers and Pumpkins. That way, when any wave with lots of Sunflower zombies show up like on the first flag, simply using 2 Doomshrooms in quick succession can quickly clear out the clutter and keep our Pumpkins nice and healthy, while isolating any Sunflower zombies so that our Chompers can stunlock them up and heal our Pumpkins back to full health. Only problem is, this will only work if we can actually spend Doomshrooms every wave, and that's simply impossible if we don't have Sun to sustain it. Doomshroom Gods don't replenish their stock without Sun, and worst of all, we won't be even able to place Flower Pots, so not having Sun actually locks us out of using Doomshrooms even if we have them. Now, consider the fact that we only have 2 slots for Sun producers and Sunflower zombies are also constantly stealing our Sun, you can see why this was one absolute hell of a level. And it's not that Sunflower isn't better than Imitator Sunshroom, they generate more stun in the long run, but it's just hard to justify when it's borderline impossible to keep anything alive against Sunflower zombies that can kill like half a lane of plants every time they spawn. With how slow Pumpkins recharge, most of our defense is just vulnerable to the solar beams, and that means it's all but guaranteed that all our Sunflowers just die no matter what we do. And the further we go, the worse it gets. And relying on Sunshroom will only get us so far until we just eventually lose all our Sun and can't even place down Flower Pots anymore. Like, what the heck even is this, man? And even when I eventually got lucky enough to survive and see the second flag, we just can't deal with 2 or more Sunflower zombies spawning in the same lane on the same wave, even after spending a Doomshroom, that is. Pumpkins just die way too quickly, so there's not even time for Chompers to stun the Sunflower zombies before they just get vaporized, and once that happens, we obviously just lose. Yeah, we're gonna need some next level luck on how far apart the Sunflower zombies spawn if we want to survive this. With all these problems combined, that is why, for 3 consecutive days, I was just stuck on this level, dying over and over again. No matter how good our early game was or what support plans I chose, it was like Groundhog Day because death was seemingly inevitable. And with virtually no progress made as well as no end in sight, this level was starting to seem like a purgatory we'd be stuck in forever. Now, despite for failing 3 days straight, I still set my sights on trying to solve the problem of Pumpkins not surviving when 2 Sunflower zombies spawn together. So much so that I actually started playing this level off stream, seeing if something else like Gloomshroom could work here. That's because I figured with Gloomshroom, I could ditch Lilypad and instead bring in Walnut to help protect our Pumpkins. That's far more important than saving the few Doomshrooms we'd otherwise spend on zombies in the water lane that Gloomshrooms can't kill. But initially, Walnuts just weren't all that great because Sunflower zombies still had quite a lot of time to massively damage our Pumpkins before they would get close enough for Gloomshrooms to do anything. And since it doesn't take that long for our Walnuts to just go from full health down to 0, it did initially seem like we were back at square one with this strategy. Regardless though, I still put in the time off stream just trying to improve and adjust the setup wherever I could, because being able to make Walnut work here would pretty much solve our entire problem against Sunflower zombies. And for a moment, I had a bit of hope when I figured out the crucial tactic of placing only 1 Walnut in the front rather than stacking out multiple, since having fewer targets for Sunflower zombies to damage actually meant our 1 Walnut would distribute its health away more slowly, allowing us to protect each Pumpkin for longer. And this one seemingly illogical change was what actually ended up making the difference for us to get to the second flag without any of our attacking plants dying. But it all came crashing down again when I realized that simply using Gloomshroom anti-stealth so much that we can't bust all the graves in time for the second flag. And I suppose I don't even need to explain for the millionth time that it's impossible and also unaffordable for us to deal with a grave ambush of such scale. And no matter what I try for the rest of my runs that I did off stream, it's just boom, 1 grave ambush and it's instantly game over without me even having a chance to answer what the game is throwing at us. But in my mind, if this really were just a problem to do with bad grave ambush spawns, how hard would it be just to get lucky 1 time? Well, I will try to answer that question later on stream that day by continuing to try and make the slowdown work. But alas, even after 2 more hours, I hadn't gotten anywhere. And by the end of day 4, I couldn't help but start to feel like praying to RNGesus might be the only way to beat this stupid level. 」 . But even after all that, I was still more determined than ever to beat level 6-7. People started doubting if this level was even worth playing, but I remained as locked the f*** in as ever, and I adjusted my mental to be as unfazed as possible when I lost for the 100th time in a row. And despite that, my emotions still got the better of me sometimes because of just how frustrating, infuriating, and RNG heavy this level was. Actually, what the heck? What the heck is this, man? Come on, it's triple stack again! Bro, you can't be serious! But what I did not end up doing here was giving up, because I knew if I hadn't given this level my best just yet, I am not quitting. And I am so glad I didn't, because I wouldn't have gotten this truly generational run otherwise. This is attempt 7, day 5, when I was practicing an opening for the Chomper Pumpkin strat. In fact, I was even reciting it during the run. Yes, okay, so Pumpkin, Doomshroom God, Cold Garlic, Pumpkin, Blockbuster. Yes, this level was so crazy hard that I ended up spending time working on just specific openers. And the idea behind this one is that I'm planning to maximize getting as many freaking pumpkins as possible before the first flag. And crucially, we're delaying our first Doomshroom God even though we could have gotten it first, since doing that precisely gives us just enough sun to place a Cold Garlic afterwards to help stall out the first wave. And you might think this is like excessive levels of sweat, but this is what I have to do to get exactly 9 pumpkins right as the first flag is about to come. Had I planted Doomshroom God first, this Chomper literally would have died to the Sunflower Zombie because the pumpkin would have been delayed by about 10 to 15 seconds. But that aside, what made this run generational was how seriously good my RNG was between the first and second flag. Not even once were there any double stacked Sunflower Zombies. So even though I misplayed and lost a pumpkin and a Chomper on the top lane, I was able to safely rebuild and repair my defense, albeit having to drain most of my sun reserves to do so. And oh man, did RNGs bless this run. With there being only 2 Sunflower Zombies on the second flag, even though I managed to mess up my Doomshroom twice, I actually still managed to save myself using a third one later and didn't lose any pumpkins or chompers in the process, which was basically a miracle. And the one time that there were 2 Sunflower Zombies in the same lane on the same wave, they came in the bottom lane, meaning I could actually spend 2 Doomshrooms to deal with them, one on a flower pot and one on a lily pad. So somehow, someway, without the gravestone spawning at any positions to block any of our Doomshrooms, I was able to survive thanks to there not being any Sunflower Zombies stacked on top of each other. Miracle after miracle with all the stars aligning and a perfected opening, the end was finally in sight. I ended up losing the pool cleaner and had no sun remaining, but it literally doesn't even matter because this was the penultimate wave of the level and we still have all our lawnmowers intact. And folks, I think it's time I hand it over to myself in the past for a live reaction for this momentous occasion. Yes! Yes! I think we have it! There's nothing in the water lane, right? Wait, what? That's what? What? How did that spawn? There's no way. Are you serious right now? How did that spawn? I'm actually so freaking upset right now. No! Not even throwing for content? It must have been a catapult zombie that was in the middle of dying. And in the lawnmower... 5 consecutive days of fails and working so hard to make this strat work. And all it took was a single catapult zombie that was soon to be dead launching a bucket head onto a pumpkin that had a ladder on it because there was a ladder zombie that spawned for the grave ambush on the final wave. And to this day, I still cannot freaking fathom that this actually happened. I don't even know if there's a bigger choke than that in PvZ history. What the hell was that, man? Come on, man! After the buckethead incident, I was so frustrated with myself that I started messing up some very simple timings in my runs afterwards. And with that loss looming over me, I couldn't hold myself to get anywhere close to winning again for the rest of the day. But now I know that I can't beat the level, I became ever more motivated to beat level 6-7 once and for all. That's why, on day 6, I set on my goal to livestream until I beat level 6-7. But oh boy, let me just tell you right now, this decision could end up being a severe mistake on my part. Because not only do I have to play damn near perfect to survive, but the chances that 2 or more sunflower zombies come in the same lane on the second flag are just so high that making it past this point without any RNG manipulation is close to 0. Even by doing everything correctly here, my pumpkin and chomper still died. Like, by this point is where I really start to think this level wasn't designed for humans to beat. There shouldn't be a world where I pause buffer to plant doom shrooms as fast as possible, and that's still not good enough to stop triple stack sunflower zombies because they simply have too much health and also move too fast. What can I say other than, better luck next time with how the zombies spawn, right? And for literally 2 consecutive hours, I played this lottery of a level without even surviving to see the final wave a single time. That just puts into perspective just how lucky a run we got the day prior was. Not even joking, it took nearly 3 hours for me to finally get a run where the formation of zombies on a second flag didn't just completely kill me. And for a bit, it almost seemed like this run was gonna be it because of how few sunflower zombies there were that spawned after the second flag. With my sun quickly running out, however, and our pumpkins getting overwhelmed at this point of the level, I tried my best to stall this out. And by a miracle, I managed to not give up any of our lawnmowers or pool cleaners until the penultimate wave of the level. So all I had to do now to win was to simply hold off this wave until the final wave and get a lily pad so that we can place the Doomshroom in the water to clear out any grave damages in lane 4. And it would have worked had I not placed my Doomshroom gods in the front, making them vulnerable to Jack-in-the-Box zombies spawned by Catapult zombies, and that was all it took to end our hopes and dreams. By golly, did I get so insanely close to winning once again, and losing there was so frustrating. But what that really showed was that I still had not fully optimized our defense, because if those Doomshroom gods were in the back, we would have at least had a chance to survive. And from that run onwards, I moved all my Doomshroom gods from the third column to the backmost column. Did it make a difference in like 99% of the runs where I just ran out of sun before I even reached the second flag? Not really. But just the fact that I could increase the chances of us winning and continue optimizing my defense kept me going for a few more hours. Until I eventually had to stop when I literally ran out of memory on my computer drive to store all 8 hours of recorded footage. Somehow, even after an entire day of playing just this one level, I still could not beat it. My goodness gracious. By now, it's just straight up diabolical that I have been on this level for almost an entire week, and after an 8-hour stream the day prior, I was just super exhausted and playing kinda sloppy. Like, I'm somehow forgetting to plant pumpkins to protect my blockbusters. And with loss after loss again, people started to question whether I was losing my sanity to the zombies eating away at my brain. There was another guy who was wondering if I was getting progressively zombified day after day playing this same level over and over. Hell, I was even trending on the PvZ subreddit for a day for this tournament I had to put myself through. But you know what? 99% of players would have quit before they won, and I'm the 1% willing to go above and beyond and dedicate my all towards beating the level no matter how insanely hard it was. Because I believe that perseverance, determination, and resilience would allow me to eventually succeed, and that all the effort I put in would eventually pay off. And now that I've shown you the countless failed attempts I've gotten over the course of 10 days and the emotional roller coaster I had gone through playing just this one level, it's about time for me to now finally present to you what was the final run I did on level 6-7. I started the run with Sunflower and Sunshroom as usual, and it went for the classic Pumpkin, Toad Garlic, Doomshroom God, Pumpkin Blockbuster opening I had devised back at day 5. Then transitioning into the Chomper build-up stages of the early game, I managed to secure lane 4 just in time and stop the Kona there from advancing any further. And without even a single football zombie showing up early on, I was able to get a second Doomshroom God and a second Blockbuster ahead of schedule pretty safely. And that gave me a lot of leeway going into the first flag with 5 Doomshrooms already charged up, a whole load of Sunflowers, and a whopping 2,000 sun in reserve. But oh boy was the first flag not great for us. With there being 4 Sunflower zombies, it didn't help that the bucketess that were off-screen allowed the Sunflower zombies to tank 2 whole Doomshrooms, so I was already starting to lose a couple of my Sunflowers in the front. And with me being forced to spend a third Doomshroom just to stop the bleeding from this one wave alone, the mid-game seemed to be off to a pretty rocky start. And let me tell you, RNGesus was not kind to me throughout the entirety of the section between the first and second flag. There was a sunflower zombie or two almost every wave. I had to constantly use Doomshrooms to survive, and I was losing so much stun that it almost seemed like the run was already dead. At least that's what I thought when I was playing it. So bad. I think we lost already. But folks, this run is a display of why you should never give up until it's actually over. Because despite having only 3 Doomshrooms stocked up and barely any sun going into the second flag, an actual miracle happened. Wait. No. No sunflower zombies on the second flag. What the f? Wait, what? Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the chances of that happening are, but for what it's worth, I'm gonna take whatever RNGesus gives me. And having no sunflower zombies spawn for just a wave was exactly what I needed for a little bit of extra breathing room to stock up on Doomshrooms, allowing us to keep defending and hold off for just those few extra waves, and stall until the penultimate wave before my pool cleaner would go off. And by a miracle, I had exactly one tile that wasn't covered by a grave to plant a Doomshroom in, allowing me to vaporize everything on the board. And folks, it's now time for me to let RCCH in the past to take over the commentary. Guys! Guys! There's no way! Please! There's no way. I'm pausing like 100 times here! I'm pausing 100 times! I don't care! I don't care! We're not getting screwed over about it. There's no way! There's no way! Please! Oh my gosh, guys! Let's go, man! Come on! Come on! Hell yeah! Oh my gosh! And there you have it, level 6-7, beaten legitimately after over 28 hours spent across the span of 10 whole days. With it taking 11 live streams in total to beat, I don't think it's an exaggeration for me to say that this truly was the hardest level I've ever beaten in any PvZ mod I've ever played. My goodness. And now we're finally done dealing with sunflower zombies. Would you believe me if I told you that the gramophone, the final new enemy in 40 Crumbs Edition, is even worse to deal with if it weren't for this particular custom plant we just unlocked? Which, no, this is not a planter that costs 275 sun. This is the Ampliflower, a plant that buffs plants around itself in a 3x free area. For most attacking plants like the cold garlic, an Ampliflower doubles their attack speed, as you can see from their cold waves proccing twice as often here. But what makes Ampliflowers even better is that they also buff non-attacking plants like Blockbusters by having their ability cooldowns, basically allowing each Blockbuster to summon double the Gravebusters. Can you believe this plant only costs 75 more sun than Torchwood? So obviously, I had to take advantage of Ampliflowers and brought in attacking plants like Repeaters and Gatling Piece to get that juicy double attack speed buff. And yeah, the early game is now basically a joke. Like, we're knocking the zombies back so much, the game's not even able to register the projectile collision since they're off the screen. So, what could possibly be so bad about the new gramophone enemy that I went as far as to say they're worse than sunflower zombies? Well, I'll just let the gameplay speak for itself. The gramophones are here. What the hell? Why the bucket is in the front? Wait, what? What? What the heck is this? What? What are Jack Box spawning? What the heck is this? Nah, man. Are these guys spawning zombies? What? Nah, man. What? Bro, we're so cooked. The heck is this? Bro, are these guys spawning zombies in the front? You gotta be. And we're dead. You thought sunflower zombies couldn't be bad. Here comes infinite zombie spawner, bro. Well, now the board is less cluttered, I can properly introduce you to the gramophone. It summons a random zombie from the level lineup infinitely until it's killed every 5 seconds, which I'm afraid Gatling Peas are severely outmatched here by the several orders of magnitude. And get this, each gramophone has 6,000 HP. That's as much health as a Giga Gargantuar, by the way, and with Screen Door Zombies plus Bucketheads in this level, that makes each of these things tank 14 explosives before dying. I wish I were joking, but this is like a level of absurdity so crazy! There's no reasonable world where such an enemy should even exist in a tower defense game. Like, surely the modder made this mod without expecting any human being to actually ever get this far. And let me tell you, other attacking plants like melon poles are even worse. You'd think their ability to lob more melons the more zombies are in a lane would be good here, but in practice, their single target damage is just so bad they stand no chance against the gramophones or even just the flag zombie on the first flag. And Jack-in-the-Box zombies are even worse to deal with when you can't knock them back or kill them in one hit, so using melon pole is pretty much a lost cause. What's worse are cattails. I tried buffing them with an Ampliflower, but it actually makes them do less damage because it slows down their attack speed. Now, I'm certain that's just a bug, but it just means that the chances for cattails to somehow DPS down the gramophones may as well be non-existent. We're basically placing down free airburst darts and hoping for it to take down balloon areas, which, like, come on, that is just an outright terrible idea. And even with Cop Cannons, which are usually great all round, we're completely ineffective against the gramophones because of how much health they have. Like, I legitimately targeted 4 Cop shots straight at the gramophones, and that basically did nothing against them. And unless we have perfect RNG, dealing with Jack-in-the-Box zombies with Cop Cannons is gonna be borderline impossible. So what the heck are we even supposed to do to just survive here? Well, there's just one specific plant that makes this level possible, and that is the Madness Room. Removing screen doors and buckets so that we don't have to spend 20 years killing each gramophone is definitely nice, but ensuring that Jack-in-the-Box zombies can't explode is the most important, as that enables us to use Gloom Shrooms to counter the insane amount of zombie spam this level throws at us. And of everything I tested, this was literally the only strategy that I could survive for more than 10 seconds with. But this setup we currently have is still quite far off from being reliable in the long run, because we have way too few Madness Rooms to deal with how fast new Jacks are being spawned in. And by the way, we still haven't even found a way to kill any of the gramophones yet, so believe me, this is gonna be a long ride. Now, the thing is, when we're getting overwhelmed, we can't just place a new Madness Room because another Jack spawning in just puts us back in the same situation. And the same problem if we kill them using instant kills like Doom Shroom. This means actively preventing new Jacks from blowing up our defense is a must, and the only way to do that is to have more Madness Rooms, which, as boring as it sounds, we can only do that by optimizing our early game stun management. So I tried moving things around, changing up our support plants and freeing up space for more Madness Rooms, but none of those changes made much, if any, difference here. But thank God I was live streaming this, because I would not have tested if Ampliflowers could buff Madness Rooms if it weren't for a chatter who suggested it. And yeah, having a plant that just halves Madness Rooms cooldown from 30 down to 15 seconds was, you know, a pretty freaking massive improvement. But arguably, the more important change I made was my decision not to run Lily Pad to save a whole slot. See, with Madness Room, none of the zombies in this level actually have high enough hit points to get past a Gloom Shroom in the water, meaning we could just get away with not even running Lily Pad since there's nothing to actually block off there. Well, the sole exception to that is the Flag Zombie, which of course had to spawn it in the water lane the one time I was trying to do this level without Lily Pad. Now, the chances of that happening twice in a 2-flag level are 4%, so I thought that was surely worth risking, since it frees up a whole slot for something else like Squash, which helps us deal with gramophones. And there probably are better support plants than Squash, but the only thing that matters is that this setup is capable of keeping on par with the stupidity that is this level, which, honestly, good riddance. I really did not enjoy dealing with a trillion Jack-in-the-Box zombies spawning every second. So, only the final wave now remains, and the only thing we need to not happen is a zombie somehow slipping through in the water lane, which can only happen if the flag zombie spawns there, or if our defense in lane 4 somehow gets destroyed by some random Zomboni from a grave ambush. Like, you literally cannot make this up. I don't think there was literally any zombie in the game other than the Zomboni that could actually make us lose there, because we had lawnmowers in every ground lane. Obviously a skill issue on my part, right? Like, words cannot describe how annoyed I was at that happening, because I would end up having to spend so much time just dying to random just to essentially try and beat this level that I've effectively already beaten again. Which, thankfully, did not take me 10 extra days to do, as I managed to get it done just a bit over an hour later. But this was just the introductory stage to gramophones, so you do know what's coming up next, right? Well, it's time for level 6-9, the penultimate level of adventure mode, and boy, you can already tell this combination of zombies is going to be painful to deal with. And of course, this is gonna be a free flag level. So with even more metallic zombies than in 6.8, I brought in Magnitude and Amplifier once again, but also the final custom plant in this mod, the Blover Warrior. And for just 325 Sun, Blover Warriors deal 2 piece worth of damage to all zombies in their lane while also slowing them and knocking them back every second. Yeah, do you want this or a Melon Pole and 25 extra Sun? Like, being able to stun lock any slow moving zombies until they die is already insane, but with Magnishroom, now not even Bucketheads or footballs will pose any sort of threat as Blover Warriors can just clean them right up. In fact, they do so much damage, it actually ends up anti-stalling the early game to the point where we can't even bust all the graves or even have more than like a handful of Magnishrooms by the first flag. And I'm afraid the one thing Blover Warriors are not good at is dealing with Brave Ambushes because, well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory if you just look at the gameplay. Not the first instance of something being so good that it's actually bad. So, back to Gloomshroom it is. And yes, I'm once again not rolling Lilypad because the chances of a flag zombie appearing in the water lane twice or more in the free flag level are actually still only 10.4%. So, risking that to run an extra support plant like Cold Garlic is still certainly worth it. But with more metallic zombies this time around, we actually run out of magnetization capacity much quicker, even though we're just running back the same setup as in 6.8. And while it is fine to not answer Bucketheads or even ladder zombies instantly, leaving diggers alive for a long time can easily lead to our pumpkins getting destroyed. And if that happens, then more likely than not, the Gloomshroom that ends up exposed is just gonna die, which is obviously pretty bad for us. However, the more likely scenario that actually causes problem is to do with football zombies in the water, because we only have a very short amount of time to take its helmet off before it just runs past our Gloomshroom and straight into our house. Pretty concerning we're getting overwhelmed when there's like a whole extra flag to go and we don't exactly have that much more space for Magnishrooms. And while I tried my best to plant more of them, there were simply too many football zombies later on that eventually, one of them in the water lane just slipped past their defense and I was completely out of stun to plant anything that could stop it. I mean, we still made it past the second flag, so surely this could just be bad RNG, right? Well, I retried this level with the same loadout a couple more times, but what became clear was that we consistently lacked the magnetization capacity to not get overwhelmed by football zombies, as that was what killed us in basically every run here. So, it didn't take long until I changed my loadout to include Twin Sunflower instead of Cold Garlic. The idea here is pretty simple. If we have damage amplification, then we'll be killing the gramophones faster, and that reduces the amount of zombies spawning at once. But obviously, the downside to that is this anti-stalling, which means more gramophones spawn faster, and that certainly ain't a good thing. Though I do suppose the increase in number of gramophones was offset by us killing them faster anyway, so I guess anti-stalling wasn't really a problem for now. There was one close call with a digger zombie in the water that almost snuck past our defense, but that was pretty easily neutralized by just placing a Gloomshroom in the back, so it seemed as if everything was smooth sailing. But what I failed to consider was that by anti-stalling, we actually couldn't bust all the graves in time for the second flag. And I know it's just one gravestone, so this should really not be a big deal, but you gotta see what happened here. And of course, the flag zombie also had to come in the water lane, so not only are we losing the entire top lane, but we also have no pool cleaner for the final wave. Of everything that gravestone could have spawned, that was the literal worst scenario, not even an exaggeration. But despite our terrible RNG, the simple switch over to the Twin Sunflower for killing gramophones actually worked on the first try, and was enough to get us to the final wave. So now, all I needed was to not have some happen on the top or bottom lane, and we win. I mean, what are the chances we get screwed over twice in the same level, right? Yeah, that seriously happened again. I somehow managed to get to the final wave just to lose to some random for the third level in a row, not even throwing for content. This just goes to show just how stupid 40 Crumbs Edition truly is, and I can't wait to finish off this mod because we're now moving on to the last level of Adventure Mode. My goodness gracious. After playing this Forsaken mod for over half a year, we have finally arrived at level 610, and you and I both know what's about to go down. It's time for the final boss fight. For this level, we have unlimited sun and a 1-minute grace period to build our defense before the boss arrives. That's really not much time considering upgrade plans take 50 seconds to recharge. Now of course, I brought in every buff in existence to maximize our damage output. Amplifier, Torchwood, Potato Mine, you name it and I've got it. And folks, we're gonna need every ounce of damage we can get for this level because the final boss of 40 Crumbs Edition has 2 billion HP! It switches lanes rapidly, spawning Gatling P turrets every time it does, and not only do they completely shred our defense, but they also block our straight shooters from damaging the boss. And to make matters worse, it also makes a gramophone every third lane it switches into, which in this level spawns any zombie in the game, including Zombotomies. Yeah, we're not even 30 seconds into the boss fight and we've basically lost already because we only had 2 tall nuts to protect our plants with. But what you've seen thus far has just been the first of 8 phases that the final boss has, as the more health it loses, the more attacks it gains, and the more dangerous it gets. For now though, we need to focus on making drastic changes to actually survive the Gatling P turrets first. The first thing I did was to bring in Doomship God. Having instant kills will help prevent the turrets from stacking up and make sure we don't just lose everything like in our last run. I also ditched Blockbuster since the boss doesn't spawn any gravestones, so I just brought in Spikeweed instead to slow down the turrets. And most importantly, I brought in Pumpkin, as just having 2 tall nuts was clearly insufficient, and you know, the more wall plants, the merrier here. Now, although these changes did allow me to better hold off the turrets, it only did for like 20 extra seconds, because I forgot to consider how Jax can just instantly ruin the defense we have and expose us to open fire. It's kind of just over once that happens because of how fast the turrets can gun down a regular plants. What's worse is that Gravebuster zombies can also spawn from gramophones at any point and permanently block off certain tiles if we're not running grave removal. But I promise you, the fact that gramophones can spawn any zombie in the game gets a whole lot worse than just a Jack-in-the-Box explosion or like a few gravestones blocking our way. Because even if you bring back Blockbuster to counter Gravebuster zombies, spending a whole slot just to mitigate one particular weakness ain't gonna be worth it, when there are so many potential problems. Like Sunflower zombies that can effectively destroy an entire lane of defense in just a matter of seconds. Like, the game just expects us to find a way to counter every zombie in the entire game with only 10 slots. All the while, we don't even have much time to set up a defense to begin with, so what the hell am I even supposed to do here? Well, I tried many different strategies, and most of them had just a few fundamental flaws. The most common problem was that relying on something that is typically strong against most threats, such as Tallnut or Gloomshroom, is just not gonna work against a few special zombies that can outright insta-kill plants like Jalapeno or Jack-in-the-Box zombies. The fact they randomly spawn just makes stalling and protecting stuff in this level a damn near impossible task. And just trying to mitigate that problem, I say, using a strategy that relies on spamming instant kills then leads us to have no way to stop the constant rounds of peas being shot at us, which basically prevents us from even safely placing our flower pots to begin with. And also, you might have missed the fact that the boss actually died here from the Tangle Kelp one-shotting it, but doing that just soft locks the game and doesn't allow us to win, so using Tangle Kelp to cheese the water lane is also not an option for this level. And of everything I tested, what did by far the worst was any strategies involving plants that do single target damage. Since the boss constantly spawns turrets and gramophones in front of itself, we'll never get any damage through it by only targeting the frontmost enemy. So what do we even do? Is there a splash damage plant that can solve all these problems I just mentioned? Well, look no further than the Blover Warrior. Not only is it really good at doing consistent, high group damage, but its fast recharge means we can quickly set up defense in multiple lanes. That way, when the boss starts making turrets in every lane, we won't have to rely on just instant kills to answer them, as we'll also have Blover Warriors that can kill them off quickly, thereby minimizing the damage done to our wall plants. And by spamming Blover Warriors, we can finally hold off the initial onslaught of turrets and start making some progress against the boss. But obviously, the downside of Blover Warriors is that their single target DPS is pretty lacking, which, combined with the fact that Giga Gargantuars are completely immune to knockback effects, effectively forces us to take their hits with Tall Nuts. Definitely not good in the long run, as that eventually leads to some not so great things happening. So once again, we're completely lost since like 40% of our defense is already dead from just that aftermath of that Zomboni explosion, but at least I did manage to survive for long enough to see what the boss does in phase 2, which triggers when it goes below 1.8 billion HP, where it starts to literally summon 20 buckets and 5 screen doors at once spread across 5 lanes periodically. Pretty fair balance if you ask me, and keep in mind there's still 6 more phases to go, by the way. Now, since I needed to kill Giga Gargantuars faster, the easy fix was to ditch Magnet Shroom and bring in Imitator Potato Mine to get damage amplification more often, which yes, makes us more vulnerable against zombies like diggers and jacks, zombies which Blover Warriors cannot counter, but since we can just be more conservative with our Doom Shrooms and save them for countering the few specific zombies we can't normally kill, it's not that bad RNG-wise. That's why even though we weren't exactly completely safe in every lane the whole time, there were just enough wall plants protecting our defense that we were able to survive. But here's the bad news. Once we enter phase 3 of the boss, which triggers immediately after it goes below 1.5 billion HP, it now also shoots 30-some botany peas in all directions around itself, and that inflicts a ton more damage to our wall plants. And even though it may not seem like much at first, the fact that we had been only barely holding up made this so this was the straw that broke the camel's back, and we had started losing some parts of our defense here or there, which eventually we just fell behind too much and got overwhelmed in multiple lanes at once, and you know it's more than over once our lawnmowers or pool cleaners are being used up. But hey, we actually made it all the way to phase 4, which simply adds Snorkels and Dolphin Riders into the bucketed tsunami attack after the boss is below 1 billion HP. Yeah, don't ask me how they're riding dolphins on the ground. The important question here is how can we even push this further to keep progressing? Well, remember what I said about it not being too bad RNG-wise? I take it back, because progressing any further now is basically just a game of hoping RNGesus doesn't spawn so many high HP threats like sunflower zombies, since there's nothing we can really cut from this loadout to further increase our damage output. It's not even a matter of skill when gramophones are just out here spawning jalapeno zombies that instantly explode in our face. There's simply no way to make a comeback if 20% of our defense just dies out of our control. And just to illustrate how big of a difference simply getting more favorable spawns makes, I ran the same setup back without even changing a thing, but because there were no sunflower zombies and only 2 Giga Gargantuars throughout the first 3 phases of the boss, I managed to get it down all the way down to below 1 billion HP with all my wall plants still alive. I even managed to get an extra Doomshroom god that I haven't even used yet. In fact, I was lucky enough that I took the boss down all the way below 700 million HP without breaking a sweat, triggering the start of phase 5. And boy, it only gets more RNG heavy from here, as the boss will now start to summon 15 Gatling P turrets all at once repeatedly at random intervals, because of course, we needed more randomness. And after somehow surviving waves of turrets thrown our way and getting the boss under 600 million HP, this then starts phase 6, where it starts to spawn 5 Gargantuars and 5 Gramophones all at once randomly. Good luck defending that, quite literally. But don't even worry about surviving this complete RNG slop just yet, because we're gonna need the game to not end up crashing from all the projectiles and zombies on the screen in the first place. And boy, is this just one of many problems to come. And I say that because the game crashes are not an isolated incident. It crashes like very often, and even sometimes just seemingly out of nowhere, even if there weren't that many entities to begin with. And by often, I mean a good like 10 to 20% of my time spent on this level was just wasted on runs that ended up crashing, which was annoying enough already. But they weren't even the most infuriating thing about this level. At least for me, what pisses me off the most is when a sunflower zombie spawns in the first 20 seconds of the level and kills our ampliflower, which basically makes it an insta-loss. And I know this sounds like such a specific scenario, but no, this didn't just happen twice in a row, which is already unlikely enough. Because it somehow actually happened to me 3 times in a row. Like, the chances of that are probably less than 1 in 10,000. I'm not even kidding. In 80% of the games that don't result in a crash, a good 10 to 20% of the time, an early sunflower zombie spawning just kills so much of our defense that it just basically ends the run instantly. And combine everything I just mentioned with the fact that we need favorable spawns to make it far, that means very few runs are even playable in the first place. The best I ever managed was to reach phase 7, which started after the boss went below 500 million HP, where it got an additional Spiral P attack to further pummel our defense. Yeah, at this point, where do you even place Doomshroom when any flower pot just gets instantly disintegrated before they can be even planted on? And there's somehow still a whole other phase that we haven't seen yet? Like, are we serious? Just look at what is happening on the screen right now. You gotta truly appreciate simply how impossible it is to stop this many Zombotany Ps at once with only Talnut and Pumpkin. And after 3 consecutive days of livestream playing just this level, not even once did I even come close to reaching the final phase of the boss. But even with the level seemingly impossible, and no sign we were getting any closer to beating it, I did not give up hope, as there was still one last thing I could do. I didn't want it to come to this, but for my own sanity's sake, I'm resorting to using save scumming to beat the level instead. And to be fully transparent, the level is possible without it, but just let me explain just how insane the amount of luck needed is here, and it actually all comes down to Gravebuster zombies. See, since we've always run Blockbuster to counter them, we were effectively down a whole slot and couldn't bring 3 different wall plants at once. But if we simply made it so that Gravebuster zombies don't spawn, say by using save scumming, we can effectively gain a seed slot by simply not running Blockbuster. So believe you me, we'll be doing exactly that, since Walnut really provides the make or break difference in this level in terms of defense protection. Like, we're a quarter of the way through the boss, and our tallness have been practically untouched. The difference with and without Walnut is like night and day. Now, the one thing I didn't do was to attempt this strategy without save scumming, because there's legitimately a better chance I'd be dead before I would actually win, with just how often Gravebuster zombies spawn. And I say that because there's literally only been one person in history who's gotten lucky enough to beat this level uncheated. Yeah, the level of luck required for not even a single Gravebuster zombie to screw you over for all practical purposes is non-existent. But by simply bypassing this one single RNG component in this level, we go from barely clinging on for dear life every run to just a smooth ride straight to phase 6. And honestly, I feel like I kind of deserve this after all the torment I've already been through. That said, the save scumming process was still extremely tedious, especially once the gramophone spam kicked in during phase 7, which, as you can guess, more gramophones means Gravebuster zombies spawning way more often. And by more often, it's multiple per minute, so just letting one go isn't even an option to save on real time here. That is why it ended up taking me a whole 30 minutes just to get through the first 7 phases of the boss. And you can imagine, backing out and going back in about 100 different times, certainly not a pleasant experience. But thank God I was save scumming, because figuring out how to beat the final phase of the boss took me longer than all 7 other phases combined, as the boss starts healing itself after it drops below 100 million HP. So quickly, in fact, that attacking plants become effectively useless against it. And with any flower pots you place getting instantly obliterated by Zombotany bees, I realized there was no easy way to place a Doomshroom. So yeah, Houston, we have a problem. And boy, don't even think about just using a pumpkin to protect a flower pot, since that only works for one Doomshroom, and that's basically just a drop out of the ocean here. Hell, even if you manage to get a second one off using Lily Pad, that doesn't even get you through a third of the 100 million HP here. And with how fast the boss heals itself, we practically have to kill it in one fell swoop because it otherwise wipes out any progress we make in just a few seconds. Like, are you even supposed to kill this thing? I spent the next 10 minutes reloading the save trying to figure that out, but no matter what, the boss can simply heal faster than we can place flower pots for Doomshrooms to damage it. So I was forced to rewind to an older save to make a change of plans. But even when I pre-placed lily pads to make space for Doomshrooms for the final blow, I couldn't figure out how to not have them just die to whatever's on the screen. Like, no matter where I placed my Doomshrooms, all of them just died in a couple of frames after they were placed. It almost seemed hopeless, but I did not give up here, because deep down I had a feeling that if I truly took advantage of every opportunity the boss offered, there would be a path to victory. And with all the odds stacked against us, I would find the extremely precise line needed to win here. Pumpkin first in lane 4 to protect the flower pot, then Lilypad in the bottom lane, setting up for 2 spots for Doomshrooms. Then, a Doomshroom gut replacing a Blover Warrior to get that extra Doomshroom for the final blow, and setting up our Potato Mine for that damage amplification. Followed by a Tall Nut in front of our Pumpkin and a second Lilypad to secure 2 more spots for Doomshrooms. And last but not least, right before we are to unleash 4 nukes upon the boss, the MVP of this loadout, and the only way I could have gotten this to work, the Walnut, to protect both lane 4 and 5 at once. And there we have it. That is 4 safe spots to place 4 Doomshrooms, and by unleashing all of them at once, I finally got it done. I finally beaten 40 Crumbs Edition. It took me so long to do this, but my goodness, was it satisfying to finally finish off what may remain the hardest PvZ mod I will ever attempt. But that aside, this absolutely insane journey from start to finish took over 100 hours across 37 different live streams. Like, this mod took way too long for me to beat, and of course it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for everyone who joined along the way to watch me do it. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And especially shout out to channel members for your continued support. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.